Welcome to Top Tube, a cycling podcast sharing the joy and pain of amateur riding with a little insight into the pro peloton along the way. With me, as always, are the haute cuisine to my hautecam, David Quainton.
Hello.
And the Col du Daily Star to my Col du Telegraph, Stephen Balby.
Good day to everyone.
I'm Graham Wilgoss, as ever. What should we start with this week, David? Podcast number 2, episode 2.
Well, thank you. Can we not start with, is it hautecam or is it hautecam? How do we pronounce it?
I'm fairly sure it isn't hautecam, Graham.
Hautecam? What did I go with? I can't remember. I pronounce it several different ways.
I believe you actually did
say
say hautecam, but then you also said haute cuisine. So welcome to entomology to this.
Welcome to terrible French pronunciation. Dreadful.
Surprise new direction for the podcast. So on the subject of corrections, as we're going to start there, we've had a couple of people write in already, which is very nice, on our Instagram page, and correct us on which is the highest mountain pass in Europe.
Yes,
Stephen, would you like to...
Well, even as I spoke the words last week, I realised that it was not as I claimed, the Col d'Iseran. Sorry, it is in fact the Col d'Iseran. I said it was the Col d'Izoard. Like, oh my goodness.
Tying yourself in all sorts of knots.
So, on that bombshell.
Professionals.
We British blokes who can't speak French and shouldn't try. It is the Col d'Iseran in first, and in fact the Col de la Bonnette in third, and then in second place, the second highest road pass in Europe is the Passo dello Stelvio.
You can find out, actually, all of those climbs are featured on our Instagram channel.
What's our Instagram channel, David?
At Top Tube Podcast, where we, daily 2 or 3 updates, and you can see pictures of the team as well.
Yes.
So
and for those more ambitious cyclists out there, they can also be found in France and Italy, respectively. Go and have a go, if not in February.
So what have you been up to this week, man?
This week, apart from... I ran a half marathon over the weekend, which was painful.
You did? How did it go?
55 seconds of pride left on the table. 1 hour, 59 minutes and 5 seconds.
Nice. So it was more a half stroll?
Oh, battled through. The last 10k were tough. So the Tunbridge Wells half, beautiful half
it's
marathon.
Quite a hilly part of the world, though.
Very hilly, yeah. A loop around Tunbridge Wells, going out on St John's Road and coming back in through Rusthall and Langton Green, for anyone who knows the area, or Langton Green and Rusthall, I should say. And
it's very hilly, I imagine, probably 30% gradients the whole way.
Well, it wasn't quite that bad. Not quite so much, that much of an excuse to be finishing in that sort of time. But the first 10Ks I got through in 51 minutes, just over. 51 minutes and change, and then tanked.
After that chasing experience, how did you address the issues that you might have been having with a little bit too much winter weight? What did you do to address that?
Well, I might have polished off half a boxer for one of the big boxes as well, Ferrero Rocher, to myself yesterday evening.
We'll guarantee
we'd been out for a beer, hadn't we? So they're like Pringles, aren't they? Once you pop, they're really more.
Stephen, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I would like to point out that, in fact, Graham, I've been up to athletically more running, and I've planned out my cycling campaign. We've actually planned our Top Tube events for this year, and I'm now going to start actually training for them. First one's coming from me.
We're going to talk about training a little bit later on the podcast. When does your running finish? Have you got a particular time?
I'm still doing that. I'm going to continue doing it because running, it's good cross-training. Graham, to pick up on a point you made there earlier, in fact, don't beat yourself up about your relatively modest running time.
I beat myself up yesterday over 13.1 miles. Thank you very much.
In fact,
to do it again today.
You've hit on, you've been doing that in the style of the cyclists of old, really, who would make it a point of honour never to do anything other than ride. So when they would, never walk if you can sit down, never sit down if you can lie down.
Any energy waste,
and never leave any packet of Ferrero Rochers uneaten,
untouched.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to what else has happened in the professional ranks this week, there's been quite a lot of activity, actually. I guess the biggest thing has been the Tour of Colombia, which actually ended up being a really quite exciting race. One in the end.
Surely you don't mean the Tour of Colombia 2.1.
It's Tour of Colombia 2.1 to give it its
Colombia 2.1.
Immensely catchy name. Won in the end by Superman Lopez, ahead of Sousa, the young Sky signee. And Martinez at EF Education First, leaving Bernal in fourth, who many would have thought was the favourite for it. Any takeaways for you guys from that?
Well, only obviously modest surprise that Sosa finished ahead of Bernal.
By some distance as well.
For anyone who missed the Sosa signing by Sky, he was actually going to Trek, and then Sky essentially swooped in at the last moment when there was some contract hold up. And then Dave Brailsford actually apologised. I don't know if I should use the word apologise. He certainly, in Brailsford speak, acted slightly sheepishly and admitted, well, you've got to take your chances, but obviously it's not the way we like to do things. Anyway, he clearly saw that Sosa was a talent. He's not very well known, has to be said, but this clearly proves that they found another top Colombian. I was listening to Brailsford speak, actually. In the news recently, he's been linked with, he took a meeting with the Colombian government while Sky were at that race. He's been strongly linked with Colombia or Colombian government influenced companies potentially.
Well, do we think this is a coincidence then? Do we think the fact that the Tour of Colombia, well, first of all, Sky have sent over something of an A-team. They've sent their best Colombians over. They've sent Froome over there, haven't they? Do we think this is a coincidence that it's getting a little bit more coverage than usually it might? And the fact that he's, as you say, been talking about a Colombian takeover. Sky and even new sponsor.
Sky have certainly got a rich history with Colombians, as indeed does cycling, and indeed we'll be talking about that later in this episode. Brailsford has said that, in fact, it's part of his marginal gains philosophy, where he wants to, rather than just welcome Colombians into the team and ask them to adapt, he wants to learn about the culture in order to help them adapt and feel at home and thus get the best performances out of them. Who knows whether that's, spin? I'm sure there's truth to that. But
it sounds like Brailsford needs their help, doesn't he, if he wants a cycling team next year?
Well, indeed.
Okay, then, Graham, Stephen, a lot of great Colombians, some great hopeful young Colombians at the Tour Colombia 2.1. Graham, who do we think out of the group of young, up-and-coming, very talented Colombians is going to have the best career when we look 10 years from now?
So, 10 years from now, Nairo Quintana could still be racing.
Technically, if you're putting the Valverde.
He could still be winning tours.
He's only graduated to the after dinner circuit.
He's only 29.
Exactly.
I had to look this up to confirm it.
Oh, so in fact, there's something here. There's something here because he's following in the now heady tradition of Colombians who are in fact in their mid to late 20s.
He looks like he's 50. Well, he's a day.
Rigoberto Urán, when he was in his early 20s, looked 45 if he was a day. And I've been hearing that in fact Urán is actually essentially the godfather of Colombian cycling, where he has influence beyond his nonetheless.
Is that because he looks like Mick Jagger?
Well, perhaps, but apparently he commands deference to such an extent that in any Colombian get together, he
is great. We all like Rigoberto Urán, and there's something very likeable about Rigoberto. I can understand.
Agreed. He sets the rules at the table, doesn't he? No mobile phones and team meetups, and you have to put your phone away when you're at the table.
Do we think he'll ever win a Grand Tour?
Well, he's been on the podium, hasn't he? A couple of times.
Do we think he'll win one in future? No.
He'd have to. Are you saying it would be a situation where he'd focus on the Vuelta and winning one of those Vueltas where
yes, the Vuelta, yes,
where everyone else is
the Vuelta.
One of those Vueltas you speak of.
To answer your question, I think Bernal is the main man here, Sky's main man, or he's supposedly one of Sky's main men at the Giro this year.
And we think he was just a bit deliberately undercooked in this race.
Yeah, quite possibly. They're giving him leaders' responsibilities at the Giro this year, alongside. It depends where you read, actually. So Thomas is apparently supposed to be having a crack at it.
I thought he said he wasn't.
So Fausto Pinarello has come out this week, or in fact in the last 24 hours, and said that he's he's seen a list of the Sky Riders for the Giro, which includes Thomas, and curiously he calls him Mr. G. So he doesn't call him G like everyone else. Doesn't call him
Mr. G.
Geraint, or he calls him Mr. G, which is deferential and a little bit peculiar. But yeah, if you're someone of Fausto Penarello's prominence, I suppose you can get away with that sort of thing. So it will be between Thomas, it will be between Bernal, and Gianni Moscon as well.
Well,
so
in fact,
Moscon's
it
there
will
now,
not be between those two, because Thomas's immediate response when asked for comment was, "Yeah, I'm not doing that."
Oh, really? So you've seen the follow-up since.
But you think Bernal is going to be... Will he end up being the greatest Colombian rider ever? Has he got that sort of potential?
Well, Quintana could still win. If he went and did what Froome's done in his 30s, he'd still win 5 tours. So Bernal's got to go some way to better Quintana. Quintana's won the Vuelta. He's won the Giro. He's won 2 stages at the Tour. He's won 2 stages at the Giro. His Palmares is a serious. He's got a seriously impressive roster there.
I mean, it's conjecture. I mean, ultimately, Colombian cycling is very exciting. In 2017, comprised, if you will, 7 of 98 riders in that year's Tour de France, which for a non-European country was an extremely high level of participation. And we've been doing some research into Colombians' current and past. And Colombian cycling is in a very healthy state. They've always produced some very talented climbers, if not all-round cyclists, and that's because ultimately Colombia is a very hilly country, but it's also it's a very beautiful country, but it lacks a certain degree of infrastructure, which is why Nairo Quintana famously is reputed, truthfully, to have ridden his bike over a climb to school and back 10 miles, and was even reported by some people to have towed his sister on the back of his bike a lot of days too. So it's a means of transport. It's also a means of transcending, as with football, transcending some difficult circumstances. What is certainly true is that Colombians love their cyclists. It's a hugely popular sport in that country, as has been evidenced by the huge turnout at the Tour Colombia 2.1 rider presentation, which filled an 80,000 seat stadium.
That's incredible, isn't it? Can you tell me, in the Tour Colombia 2.1, who were the only 2 non-Colombian finishers in the top 25?
Froome.
Incorrect.
No, he's not in it. Because he did a massive pull to try and get Sosa the win in the last stage, he led the pack for some time and then dropped off.
So not Froome.
Oh, Alaphilippe?
Alaphilippe was...
cracked, didn't he?
He was 5th, I believe. No, 6th.
He was the
Alaphilippe
leader
was
until
6th,
the last stage, was it?
behind Superman, Lopez, Sousa, Martinez, Bernal, Quintana, who won the last stage, then Alaphilippe, who was the only other non-Colombian in the top 25.
Alaphilippe, you keep
Loves an extra A on the end.
Was it Jens Voigt?
Jens Voigt.
I'll give you the money myself. if he was up there, I'll give you the prize money myself.
What is the Spanish for shut up legs? Please
You'll have to tell us.
Lawson Craddock.
Oh, really?
Who obviously lit up the Tour de France last year by coming last.
Is he back to full health? Remind us of his injuries.
Well, let me tell you. So Lawson Craddock, as I said, lit up the Tour in 2018. He actually crashed on the first stage, which caused a hairline fracture in his scapula, which, if anyone knows, would make it very, very difficult to hold on the bike, particularly, he said, during the TT stage.
He's screaming with pain, isn't he?
He ended up the Lantern Rouge. He said he would donate $100 for every stage he finished to the Greater Houston Cycling Association for the rebuild of the Alkek Velodrome, where Craddock got his start in cycling. It was damaged by Hurricane Harvey, which we know it's a lot of damage in the region. A GoFundMe page was set up, and by the end of the Tour de France, he'd raised $200,000.
Yeah, that's seriously impressive.
Incredible. Anyway, he's back to full health.
He was actually his team. He talked in some detail. He's quite a mature chap, and he was distanced from in the team time trial by his team almost immediately. And some people asked him, "Well, did you resent that, having to ride on your own to come within the cut-off time?" Which was, on that basis, an astonishing ride, and why probably it garnered so much media attention just on that basis. And obviously he said, well, we're here for the team, and I didn't resent that at all. But I don't want to go home after 2 stages. But his ride was in the grand tradition of rock hard cyclists in the vein of Tyler Hamilton, who rode almost the entire tour back in the 2000s with a broken collarbone and ground down his teeth so much they had to be, with pain, that they had to be recapped afterwards. Or Alberto Contador in 2000.
There's the benefit of tramadol there.
Well, indeed. Well, surely that's encroaching line.
And tramadol was legal.
Is it? Okay.
And I'm pretty sure he's written about it.
Well, talking of other people who have no involvement in doping, Alberto Contador rode 70 kilometres with a broken leg before, in fact, back in 2013, the tour that... 14, the tour won by Nibali, that both Contador and Froome crashed out of on consecutive days, and had to be put in the car by his director sportif, who apparently had to virtually beg him to give up and get in the car.
You've had some bad injuries. I remember you calling me up almost in tears after ending up riding down a motorway with a rag stuffed into a hole in your leg.
I've never cried. I'm a cyclist. You don't do that. But not like you footballers. But yes, that is true. I was 17. It was one of my first forays of long distance rides, and back then in the late 90s, there wasn't much online or resources to learn before you joined the club how to be a cyclist. So I barreled off with tracksuit bottoms and some sort of tennis top, and rode 50 miles from Berkshire up to Oxford and some way back, and started to feel really funny, and I couldn't work out why. I later worked out I was just really hungry, and it was in fact a bong. And started to not manage to be able to hold myself up on the bike anymore. And I remember getting through Maidenhead and mistakenly joining the M4 and riding down the hard shoulder of the M4 with not understanding why cars were hooting at me. And then I can only piece this together in retrospect. I think I blacked out through lack of sugar in my blood and woke up rolling along the ground. I woke up mid-roll and find that I'd taken chunks out of my hands and arms in many places. I still bear the scars. And my the plug that held in my bar tape had managed to embed itself in my knee, so I had to take that out and stuff my glove in there because I could see the bone. So yes, as David says, I probably called some people and said, well, I'm in a spot of bother, and ended up having to ride back to home anyway at what I can only assume was the slowest pace any cyclist has ever undertaken.
You ever had any bad accidents? Have you seen any bad accidents, Graham?
Well, I've been behind you two when you were far too close to each other.
I'd forgotten about
far too close to each other, and you sort of sense when something's going to happen, where you kind of get not quite a spidey sense, but that sort of, I don't know, that ill sort of sitting feeling that we're going a bit too quickly here and you're a bit too close. So I just started to pull off the back, just ease off just a little.
What event was this?
This was the Cycling Weekly South Downs.
So a mix of abilities, and we were at the head of a group and barreling along, and I realised we'd missed a turn.
Someone in the Surrey lanes, yeah. And you were the front of our...
I did the
ill-fitting chain gang
that you should never ever do, which is jam your brakes on suddenly. And in my defence, I only did that because I assumed I'd gone so far past the turning. I assumed we'd gone so far past the turning that I was the only one who'd missed it. So I was just going to turn around and expected no one to be behind me and everyone to be gesticulating, yeah, we've gone this way. And it turned out there were 20 people behind me, including David, 1 centimetre, as he always is, just right there on my wheel. I jammed the brakes on. He flew into the back of me. I flew as a consequence.
Well, no, I think David smashed. So from my point of view, so I don't know that your recollection is entirely accurate, that you had other things to worry about at the time. You were far too close to each other. You braked to turn right. There was a car coming towards you as well. David managed to smash into the side of you at a right angle, so he sort of caught your sort of right arm and leg, I suppose, and the right side of your bike. David then did a full 360-degree flip and somehow managed to land on his feet.
I just forgot about it.
Where you just face planted into the curb, and you were incredibly lucky given the speed of the impact, you were incredibly lucky to eventually get yourself up. And I had to bunny hop over David's bike. I had the presence of mind and the Peter Sagan fearlessness and bike handling in my head. Yes.
What Graham is getting to there is the fact that as he saw his colleagues just splattered all over the road, he was like, "Did anyone see my bike handling though?" Amazing.
Well, it was sensational. Neither of you will ever know it. You'll never believe me. Anyway, you managed to find someone with painkillers as well, with paracetamol.
It was fine after my hand had gone completely numb after about 10 miles later. It was absolutely fine.
You shaved a few miles off as well, didn't you? You cut a couple of corners and then eventually crossed the line.
I was convinced I'd broken several of my fingers. I think I finished an hour ahead of you, but okay. Let's say half.
But you cut off half the course from that point. You didn't complete the course. That's not scandalous at all.
Someone that did not cut off any corners in the last week is Gorka Izagiri. How are we pronouncing that?
It's Sagiri.
It's Sagiri, not his brother Ion. It's Ion. We go with it, Ion. Anyway, Gorka won the Tour La Provence by 0 seconds from Simon Clark.
The Tour La Provence,
which must be
a chilly old time to go do that.
To lose by 0 seconds, but nevertheless, the Tour La Provence, which by the way went over the Galibier.
Explain to us how he's managed to lose by 0 seconds,
and explain to us why the organisers of the Tour of Provence are holding the Tour of Provence in February.
Well, he lost by 0. He won by 0 seconds by finishing ahead in more stages. I am literally making that up. I'm really I have no idea. I should have researched it. I'm getting looked at the moment with kind of condescending
incredulity.
He won because he was adjudged to have won according to the stated rules.
Yeah, that is why he won.
So do we assume that he finished further ahead in the pack on how many stages is the Tour of Provence? Have you literally just picked up that you?
I've
Charlotte. Let's ask me more questions that you can't answer.
It's the Tour de la Provence.
Good.
2.1.
Right. Yep.
David is currently reading off procyclingstats.com.
A number of stages. Let me tell you how many. There were 4 stages.
Oh, we'd love to know.
Was one of them a time trial?
One of them was a time trial.
Well, there you go. Then that's why you finished 0 seconds, because it was actually tenths of a second as is measured in time trials. Right, shall we move on then? Yeah, would you like to ask my second question? Why are they staging the Tour of Provence of all places in...
And going up the Galibier?
Yeah.
Can you go up the Galibier?
No, it's the Petit Galibier. Which I think we should all have a go. There's a little Galibier that you can go up this time of year.
In Provence, as opposed to in the Alps.
Well, obviously they didn't go up onto. Why not? Why not ride in the south of France at this time of year and just stay below 1,000 metres? Sounds like.
So where do they go? Aix?
They did. They finished in Aix-en-Provence.
Yeah.
So the Tour of Oman, the last 2 stages have been won by Alexei Lutsenko after Christoph won the opening sprint. Lutsenko is now obviously top of the GC, but it's been a good start to the season.
What characterises the Tour of Oman?
Heat.
Isn't it? And the utterly flat.
And the Green Mountain.
No, there's the Green Mountain, famously, which is characterised by them having done a lot of... It's very man-made, essentially. Paid a lot of money, there's a lot of money there to stage the race.
So they've artificially constructed a racetrack up the mountain in the same way you might create a racetrack for an F1 car.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Anyway, the point is, it's a race, it's hot. Chris Froome's won it a couple of times. Who is in it this year? No one who will contend in any of the Grand Tours. Ergo, shall we say it's of little consequence for the rest of the season?
Is it of consequence for the rest of the season?
It used to be the first indication of where people where people like Contador and Froome were. And now it's sort of
it's only this season, isn't it? Because everyone's gone to Colombia.
Well, a race is only as good as its competitors, so perhaps it will come back next year.
Okay, that's the news. Welcome to part 2. One thing we briefly mentioned in part 1 was a sock bet. Graham, do you want to you want to tell us what a sock bed is and why you might hear that 1 or 2 times over the course of...
Also, I didn't cut the course on the Box Hill Sports Eve. I have proof on Strava. I will put this on Instagram. Socks, Graham, socks.
The sock bet.
How did it start? How did we
Well,
start doing the sock bets? It was over
I think because none of us could afford anything more to wager than a pair of cycling socks. So therefore,
full name Richard?
Is Richard Port's full name Richard? More on this story next week.
fascinating man sometimes, aren't you? Unfortunately, not today.
Yeah.
The sock bet, equally interesting, possibly, arguably. If we shout socks, then we are effectively wagering a pair of socks on who is right. Or whom is right.
At least 50% of the time it's been on whether Richard Port will ever win a Grand Tour.
Richard Port.
It's who is right, isn't it?
Why do you keep saying Richard Port?
I said Richard.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyway, they can't just be any socks, though, can they?
No, they have to be cycling socks. And I think there should also be a rule. Yeah, well, yes, and they can't be the same cheap cycling socks that you keep buying. Because that really frustrates me. You've a hard-won pair of cycling socks, and you get the cheapest, and they're nasty. And I've still got them with the cardboard label still on in the drawer at home. I've got 2 pairs.
That's why Graham is saying this to David.
That's because you still haven't honoured yours yet.
So I think Stephen currently owes me 3 pairs. I think I owe David a pair. David might owe me a pair.
I can understand particularly Gordon for Graham, given that he's provided David with all his kit in the last 5 years.
I can't complain about that because I didn't pay for it in the first place.
No. Should we leave that in? Yeah, why not?
Right.
Journalists get given free
stuff. Yes, well, so I think that's a secret, particularly.
Being a journalist, as you are, you were invited to see, and I'm just going to pick up the name you dropped on the floor in episode 1. Simon Gerrans, there it is.
Clang.
Thank
you. He was good value. So he's, as we said last week, he's in London because he lives here now. He's doing the Goldman Sachs internship. Sports internship. Stephen's corpsing. Come back to us, mate.
Just
what's going on?
We can have laughter in the background.
What's killed you? What's killed you?
Got the giggle. Sorry, apologies, Graham.
So, Gerrans is doing the sporting internship at Goldman Sachs. Internship awarded to people who have pursued a sporting career and have chosen a change of scene.
And how was it?
Their 9 to 5. Very personable, as we know he is. He was. So I asked him a few questions. Who's the biggest psychopath in the peloton?
Well, should we guess?
So the way I came onto that actually was to ask: are there more psychopaths on London's roads or in the city? Because obviously he's now working in the city. And he said,
since the advent of Uber, I would say that there are more psychopaths on London roads because.
I think it's probably 50-50. Actually, sorry, that's not what I asked him. I asked him, are there more psychopaths in the pro peloton or in the city? And what do you think he said? I suspect he's not been in the city long enough to start criticising it. He very quickly said the pro peloton. And then when I asked him who is the biggest psychopath in the pro peloton, who do you think?
John Degenkolb.
Stephen?
I don't know.
Would you like to hazard a guess?
Someone notably psychopathic since the retirement of Robbie McEwen. Bradley Wiggins had former times. He can be.
I'm going to put us all out of our misery. Yeah. Peter Sagan was the man he picked in terms of his bike handling and his, as I mentioned earlier, actually fearlessness, willingness to push his ability and the bike's sort of technical boundaries right to the limit.
The best thing I've ever seen in cycling is footage from when Sagan bunny hopped sideways over a curve going at 80 kilometres an hour in the finish of a stage. He did it fully sideways, and if he'd have caught his wheel at all on the curb, this was in the middle of the road, it was about 4 inches high, he would have absolutely stacked it, landed on his head at 80 kilometres an hour. He cleared it completely and just carried on. And the best thing was that the riders on his side of the road just looked at him stunned. Pros looking stunned.
For him, it's just normal behaviour. Anyway, we'll see if we can bring you the recording from the Gerrans interview because there was some good stuff in there.
I feel I should apologise to John Degenkolb because the only reason I said John Degenkolb is because he was
him as a cyclist.
It's because he was in my head because he's done something really nice.
Oh, he's a lovely man.
He's a really lovely guy. Yeah. So apologies, John.
But in this case, psycho is a compliment. It means excellent bike.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And almost lost his fingers.
John
One or
Degenkolb
two of them.
learned in the last week or so that the junior Paris-Roubaix race was under threat, and so set up a GoFundMe page and raised more than €10,000 in one day. In fact, he passed €14,000, which is more than 12 grand in English money, which is great, and will help secure the future of a race that's really important. So he's actually clearly not a psychopath. He's a very nice guy.
Is it important? Is the junior Paris-Roubaix race really that important to have teenagers having to negotiate huge cobbles in the mud? Because at that age you're teaching them how to ride a bike in a group, how to train, how to conduct themselves on the bike and off the bike, and to do a race like that is, for me, probably not going to be massively beneficial overall, but obviously some people like it, and indeed, yeah, well, it's great for the spectators anyway.
So anything more interesting from Gerrans? How was the helmet? I mean, helmets don't really change that much today.
Well, this is what he was there to talk about and there to launch, and this is a product that he's invested in himself, apparently, which is why he was there. But he's part of a company, or invested in a company that's launching a new helmet, the Hexo helmet, where you go and have your head scanned, and they will. So you've got to wear a shower cap so that your hair doesn't sort of interfere with the lines that they're looking for to be able to produce this bespoke helmet tailor-made for your head. But it's as the name would suggest, it's built with sort of several interlocking hexagons that will apparently distribute any force that the helmet undergoes and dissipate the force as it hits your head, rather than sort of causing you real damage. So in theory, if you are hit, so this puts aside the argument on whether or not you are safer wearing a helmet or not, because the one theory is that if you are not wearing a helmet, then a car driver will look at you and think, he's not wearing a helmet or she's not wearing a helmet, and therefore I'm going to give them a little more room. Whereas if you are all geared up for urban warfare, essentially, as several of us feel like we have to, then they just won't give you necessarily the room that they should.
How did it look? Is it all right?
It looked like your average cycling helmet. You don't see the hexagon pattern, and you don't see the layers underneath. But it looked like a serious piece of kit. But there's one of the few areas, certainly for amateur cyclists such as ourselves, that you've not necessarily had any sort of advance in. Well, for as long as helmets have been designed. Since foam helmets came along.
Maybe 2 years ago, there was a helmet invented that was a helmetless helmet, and it basically sat round
like an airbag,
and it was an airbag.
Yeah, you had to really trust it.
Except it was a lot of money for each one, and it could only be used once.
Yeah,
but it's obviously not taken off because I've not seen many people, or maybe I have. Maybe I've seen people using them all the time.
You just don't notice.
Don't notice. You don't wear a helmet, Stephen, do you? So what's the crack? A lot of the time, you don't wear a helmet unless you're mandated to wear a helmet.
Yes, well, except perhaps going down a mountain. For the most part, I don't. Perhaps that's because I'm perverse. Perhaps I grew up not having to wear one. In fact, the Cycling Touring Club back in about 1999, which was one of the main cycling lobbying groups at the time, actually said to the government, "Please don't make wearing a helmet mandatory, because you'll actually put a lot of people off." And people in Denmark, one of Europe's biggest participatory countries for cycling, don't wear because they just ride safely. Having said that, obviously I wouldn't advise anyone else not to. That's a personal choice.
Does ride safely mean ride slowly though? So because often
they ride with respect. Cars treat them with respect. I mean, realistically, on the road when you're out for a training ride or a commute, you're not pushing the boundaries such to the extent you're going to lose control of your bike, and you're probably going to be hit by a car, in which case I suspect that you're going to be badly off, whatever the case.
One of the fun things about commuting, I find, is when you get an open stretch of road and you can gun it effectively. That's what I enjoy.
Yes, and I like to feel the wind in my hair. I would reiterate, I'm aware this is an unpopular choice, but I guess I just resent this culture that's thrown up where if you're not wearing a helmet, you're vilified. Yeah, you're vilified. You become a pariah. Because it wasn't always like that, and ultimately,
But you don't see that. You don't see that in Holland. You don't see that in Denmark.
But they
people
do all
riding
seem
around
to ride
Copenhagen.
more sedate.
Yes,
it's
but that's
much
part
more
of
gentle,
the culture.
Yeah.
Whereas you're almost instilled with a bit of fear riding certainly on London roads.
It comes back to the lack of respect for cyclists and
or lack of respect for other people.
Well, yes, indeed, yes.
Maybe that. I feel even commuting. I feel quite competitive on a bike.
I've actually parked the competitive beast within when I'm commuting. It's just got to be
replaced it with Ferrero Rocher.
Right. Well, that's probably a side product of what came first, really. I've parked that competitive urge, that instinct, and it's getting from A to B, riding pretty defensively, riding at a suitable speed where you can. But yeah, it's if I'm gonna ride to race or ride for the feeling of having that romantic wind through your hair, Steve, then I'll do that on a closed road sportive.
Do you know what I realised last week while commuting in is that I commentate in my head when I'm riding.
You're a child.
But the thing is, it's not commentary it's not Phil Liggett. It's actually Murray Walker. So I'll be doing F1 commentary in my head while I'm riding down the embankment.
Would you care to give us?
No, I would not care to, because
we'd all love to hear it.
Maybe I'll try and record it.
That up and
Bang, bang! Yeah. Just look at that guy go. Is something like the approximation that goes in my head. But I did realise that the other day, and that's embarrassing.
Was the bike ahead of you absolutely unique, except for the one behind, which is identical?
Yeah. One thing that I do often see on the commute, on the ride in, is people who have got headphones in, which seems insane to me to actually take away a sense while you're riding in. I mean, do either of you?
Well, that is in fact illegal.
Is it indeed?
No, I think every chance you can give yourself. So why block out a sense that could save you?
Well, more to the point, you're actually putting, unlike me, if I choose not to wear a helmet, if I get hit, it's me I'm putting at risk. But by not hearing what's going on around you, you're putting others at risk.
I know people who like to wear headphones when they're doing climbs because they can listen to music and get into the rhythm of that, and that's fine. That makes sense.
And that's what Zwift is for.
Yeah, but having headphones on while you're riding into work in a city like London or wherever seems like a very silly thing to do to me.
Oh, yes.
Join us for part 3. Welcome to part 3. We mentioned a bit about Stephen riding around without a helmet on in the last section. Are you going to be doing a lot of training without a helmet on this year? What are you working towards, Stephen?
2 Everesting attempts on some exceptionally steep and difficult roads in Britain. I'm not going to reveal which ones because the first person to Everest a road officially in Britain gets to take their place in the annals of Everesting, a specific website for this purpose, and gets to wear a very special grey jersey for the purpose.
Graham, do you want to enlighten people what Everesting is if they don't know?
Well, riding up a particular climb as many times as it would take to do the equivalent distance of riding up Mount Everest.
Are you going to do any training this year? Or are you sticking rigorously to your...
Rigorously going to head to Girona for a week, or just outside Banyoles, Rocacorba Cycling, the home of Ashley Moolman-Passier and her husband Carl Passier. Yeah. So, having visited them once before, they very kindly invited me back. So I'm going to go and do 5 days of climbs around Girona, which will include, of course, Rocacorba, the climb that David Miller has named his cycling club after. And there's a climb called the Mother of God climb. Although it's I think that one's only, it's 18.5 k's, but I think the average is 5%. So it's a sort of slow poodle up. But there's a reason so many pros choose to make their base in Girona. You've got some beautiful climbs around there and some beautiful weather. And that aside, I mean, in my head, I envisage doing laps of Richmond Park first thing in the morning as it starts to get lighter. But I think we all know that that's.
So you mentioned marginal gains earlier, and we were also talking, and then you were also talking about wearing a skull cap to get your head measured.
Yeah, a shower cap.
My question is, and maybe it's something to mull over for the next week, is if marginal gains are so important, why do cyclists have hair on their head?
Yeah, you love this, don't you?
So Laura Kenny.
She's going to shave her head.
Well, she has extremely long, heavy hair. And if you're spending millions of pounds to make a screw on a bike smaller and lighter, why on earth would you have that?
It makes no difference to her.
I can answer that. It's because cyclists are hard, but also vain. Much like humans.
That's a good way to end the show.
Yes, talking of, well, certainly vain. Oh no, we can't say that. Are you hard, Steve?
That's definitely staying in. Graham?
Been a pleasure.
Graham, have you made any amendments to your training regime?
Well, last week I was pro cake. What do you think I am this week?
Well, from the sounds of it, you appear to be pro Rocher, is that
pro Ferrero Rocher? Yeah.
Rocher.
Did we mention that at the top of the show?
You've been pro Rocher. We certainly mentioned your
destroy a whole box, or
half
a
as
box.
Much a surprise to him as anyone, really.
Well, they're ideally wraps you can keep in your pocket as well. Yeah.
Right. Goodbye, everyone.
That's goodbye from the professor there, and goodbye from me. See you next week.